critical of this, of research, of claims in general. And I think it's ironic. I don't think there's any other professional group that would so readily accept claims that urge such substantial changes to our practice without, some thorough examination of the research, of the underlying research. Yet we seem to have accepted these claims about the net generation rather uncritically. So I think we need, as educators, to be much more critical when people are making claims like this. The other thing is, what this points out to me, and I alluded to this earlier, is that what the real value of academic research. Academic research is relatively transparent. It's subject to peer review. We can look at the methods, the methodology, and where the data came from and the instruments that were used, and we can make an assessment as to its quality. The research that's being presented to support the claims of the net generation is by and large proprietary, and we don't get access to that, and so we have to accept their word for it. And that's dangerous. And so we need to be much more careful about the kind of research that we accept as evidence. And finally, I think we need to clearly differentiate between generational differences and social change. I mean, everybody in this room is affected, we're all affected by technology. Our behavior is changing as a result of technology. Rory talked about it yesterday. This is not a generational issue, it's a social issue. It's happening everywhere. The younger generation obviously is going to be immersed in the technology much earlier and much more than the older generation, but the idea that technology use is strictly a generational issue is just not supported by the research. So that's it. If you want to follow this debate more, I actually have a blog called The NetGen Skeptic, which you can access at that URL. I try to add new postings as frequently as I can when I come across issues that I think are relevant. And you can contact me at that email address. And at the end, and this presentation I think is going to be distributed, and I'll certainly put it on SlideShare, and there's a whole list of references there that you can access. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think we have time for questions.
We do have time for questions, and I see Jim's, oh good, I was afraid I was going to have to ask the first question. We are streaming this, so to ask a question, would you please follow Jim's lead and come to the microphone, and Mark, carry on.
Thanks for your presentation, Mark, and for confirming some suspicions that I've been having. Actually, I recognize, having lived through the 60s generation, that it really arrived in Saskatchewan in about 1970. And so I was thinking that the NetGen was just a little slow arriving here, and that's why I was not observing it in my students to the extent that I thought I should, based on what we've been hearing in the popular press. But I think you're quite right that many of the students entering university now are not as technologically savvy as we would tend to expect, and there are still some big surprises. But I think that what we're seeing is that some of the indications in this NetGen literature do seem to have some bearing on the behaviors of students, and maybe it's actually they're reacting to their own image that's being put out there before them, around particularly issues around their attention span, their willingness to engage in lengthy lectures and diatribes, and really I think their desire to be entertained. And those features, I think, do seem to actually be present in sort of the informal analysis that I've done. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that, because I don't want to suggest that everything that's being said about this generation is incorrect and we should dismiss it. There may be, much of it, all of it could be true, could be legitimate. But the point I'm trying to make is that we don't have any evidence, strong evidence, other than our own observation of our own students to say that with any authority. but certainly I agree based on my own observations of students and my own children that attention spans are limited. Their willingness to put up with boredom is much more limited. So I think we need to do what we need to be doing is more solid research to determine whether these characteristics are pervasive and why and what the implications are, and not rely on other people to tell us this based on research that we can't really assess.
I'm always amazed in our field of research how these overgeneralizations keep popping up. And I think people should be very careful when they see words in education